Welcome to the Housing Provider Show. How you doing today, Tim?
Doing good, man. Had an interesting day yesterday. We had our clients were supposed to close probably tomorrow. We had the appraiser come out for to do look at the repairs. It's an FHA sale, so they come through and they give you a list of repairs you have to do. We got them done. Had them come back out. Appraiser came out and tried to turn the water, and there was no water.
Oh,
A little background on this story. So this is a property in the south side of Chicago, and we just had we just spent about $5,000 to repipe it because of someone stealing the copper from the basement about 6 months ago or 4 months ago, and not sure what happened or how they got in or how they found out that we repiped it, but of course they got right back in right before closing. So that's a fun another $5,000 project that the joys of investing in C and D class neighborhoods is a lot of this stuff where you're going to run into these issues. So yeah, that's a fun trying to get out alive, trying to get it sold for the client, and having this happen is something crazy.
what are some things you could recommend to potentially? I know there's nothing you can do to 100% prevent that from happening, right? But what can you do to do your best to make sure that doesn't happen?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a couple things. I mean, and I'm going to talk bigger picture. This is a special case because it was for sale, so we vacated everyone on purpose, which sort of cost us, right? Because there's no one living there,
Right.
and it's a property that's sitting, and as best as you can, it's hard to be there. But obviously, getting people in the units as fast as possible, renting them as fast as possible, having finding those tenants because the tenants are going to be your eyes and ears. Alternatively, a security system might have helped a little bit, but at the same time, there's also the chance that they get in and get out before the cops are called, before ADT or all that comes through. So that would be 50-50. But keeping everything, we had everything boarded up and things like that, but it just didn't work out for us. So yeah, I don't really know what else there is to do besides unfortunately eat it there, um, and figure it out from there. So
Now, I had a client, this may be way out of left field, right? But they decided when they had vacant properties, and this was even just during the tenancy, they would have a dog and they would bring their dog,
a literal dog,
a
not not
literal
not
real
dogs.
dog. Like
Okay,
they had 5 or 6 dogs that they kept at their home. And then when it came time, they had vacant properties, they would leave the dogs and go check on it every day and feed it and take it out on a walk or whatever. But that was his theory for keeping people out.
interesting. There's
Different.
there's a business idea. Someone that can rent dogs to leave at a vacant property. I'm going to say the dog has to be well potty trained, or you got to give it some kind of area to go in, or something. But get a couple pit bulls that are just trained to protect houses. And I mean, the problem is we have. So you're talking about real dogs. There's another
Yeah.
company that I think everyone knows, Dogs, DAWGS,
Right.
the security company. They bought out VPS, so there's only them in the game. But they're super expensive. That's one problem with them. We use them, but when in extreme situations, but they're very expensive. But on top of that, man, we just had one. We had an eviction happen. We wanted to get it boarded up with dogs, and it took them 2 weeks to come out.
Uh,
It's just unfortunate. There's no competition. They're super busy, and they have a really good product, which is the problem, right? Like it's an amazing product. Everyone wants it. There's a lot of people using it, but you almost need something in between that period.
right.
And it would be interesting if there's someone that rents out. We were talking with this client about getting private security because we're trying to close now a week later. Um, Getting private security to stay there for a few days or something like that. And yeah, it'd be interesting if someone just rented out some big German shepherds or Rottweilers that were well potty trained and weren't going to destroy
Yeah.
the house, and just, hey, you sit in the basement and here's your pee pad, here's your whatever. We'll come back every day and get you some treats. That's an interesting
And I
interesting
guess if the
concept.
front was fenced, you could just leave the dog outside.
I think you're gonna have PETA coming after you, Dave.
Yeah,
No,
yeah, that's true.
even though most 99.9% of animals just live outside, that's probably
Probably a bad
probably
idea.
against the rules there. Um, Yeah, but so that's how our week is going. This obviously won't air for a while, so this is going to be old news by the time you guys hear it. But we were also at the MBOA Summer Soiree this week, and what'd you think of it?
It was my first time. I thought it was awesome. They had great appetizers, free open bar, a ton of really cool raffles that I
Hmm.
saw that were very interesting. And yeah, it seemed like a who's who. I ran into probably 30 or 40 people I knew. It
Yeah,
was
no,
unbelievable.
absolutely. If you're in the Chicagoland REI networking areas and things like that, and you're building your portfolio or your brand, depending on where you're at, the MBOA is a really cool organization that not only is creating groups around the city and state. There's different. We sponsor the Southwest Builders Association, Building Owners Association, which is around Midway where I grew up and things like that. But there's Rogers Park. There's every area in the city at this point almost has one. And what it is they have monthly events usually that you can go, you can network, meet other investors, learn from each other. But also, it's a huge group for raising funds to go and fight a lot of the political battles that we talked about a few episodes ago. So organizations like this, organizations like the Realtors, Chicago Association of Realtors, Illinois Realtors, National Association of Realtors, all of that is just huge because that money is going to protect us as landlords, protect our property rights. And as we've said a lot, there's a lot of attacks on it. And I thought the event was really cool. It was in a spot in Ravenswood that was, pretty big. I think there was probably close to 800, 900 people there. At least that's how many tickets they sold. And yeah, I thought it was
No, I
really
think
cool. I think this
yeah,
topic
I
is a
agree.
juicy one and it's going to be pretty long. So we can go ahead and get into it now. We're talking about Monopoly again today. I know I've talked about it back when I was doing the show solo, but we want to reinvigorate it and dive deeper because the more we think about it, the more similarities there are. The original concept, and I'll go into this as sort of lesson one for the Monopoly strategy, as I call it, was when you're playing Monopoly, you have to buy houses first, right? So you're,
Right.
you're rolling the dice, you get your property, and then the first thing you can do is you can build a house on it that you can rent, and the house rents for 50 or $60, whatever it is, depending on where you're at, what area, all that stuff. As you get more and more houses, you buy 3 or 4 houses, and you can turn it into a hotel. And the hotel will make you 500 or $600 or whatever the math is there instead of the 60 times 4. So really what it comes down to is the economy of scale and the economy of a couple of things here. One is don't wait to get into the game, right? We don't want you to think that, oh, I only have 10, 15,000 to invest, 20,000 to invest. I can't buy a big multifamily, so I'm just going to wait.
Right.
The problem with that is, I bought my personal residence, which is a great example, in 2021. It's already gone up $100,000 since then, right? So by not now I have that 100,000 in equity. If that was an investment property, I could sell it and use that as a down payment. Plus, if I kept buying, if you keep buying, you're buying multiple 3, 4 properties, 3, 4 small properties, houses, condos, etc. You're going to be getting mortgage pay down with that. So you're going to have more equity. You're going to be getting equity building through just time. And then when you have enough equity, you can sell 3 or 4 small properties and buy a big property. And that big property is going to give you a few things. One is obviously the more doors you have, the less likely it is that vacancy is going to truly affect you. That's going to be your downturn, et cetera. When you have 4 doors or 5 doors and 5 houses, your mortgage payment doesn't get made by your rent when it goes vacant. When you have a 15, 20 unit building or a 50 unit building or a 100 unit building, 2 or 3, 10, 15, and a 100 unit building, 10 or 15 vacancies doesn't necessarily ruin your day. Obviously, you want them all filled, but you're not going to have a terrible month because you have a few vacancies of people moving out. So we really want to get that scale. Second thing is services that you have to have. If you have 10 houses, you have to mow 10 lawns and pay someone to mow 10 lawns. You have to clean the common area for 10. If you have 2 flats or whatever, you're cleaning the common area for 10 different places, etc. You have 10 different roofs that can go bad, 10 different,
Right.
everything. Whereas if you can get a 100 unit building with one giant boiler, one lawn, one thing, you're saving a lot of those funds. Now, even on our side, we talk about management a lot. Management's going to be cheaper, generally speaking. You're going to get a discount for having a bunch of doors in one spot. So it just makes a whole lot of sense. And here's the really cool thing: when you get into commercial real estate, you start getting into these 5+ unit buildings, the bigger the better, right? Everything trades off a cap rate.
Right.
So to create equity, all you have to do is raise the rent. So, if you have a house, the only way to create equity is time, and that time is really just your neighbors selling for a higher price. Now your house is worth more. If you have a 10-unit building and all the rents are 1,000, and let's say it's a neighborhood that's doing a 10 cap, just to make math really easy, but it's everyone's at 1,000, you have 10,000 a month in rent, and you can raise that up $100 a person. Now all of a sudden, you just 1,000 times 12 is 12,000 times 10. You just raise the value within a couple of months of a property that you bought 120,000.
Yeah, exactly. Now, Tim, when you were talking about equity, and for your example, you're up 100K.
Mm-hmm.
Rather than sell the building, you could just refinance, correct? And just use that to potentially put down on something else.
You could,
I'm
but
just interested to know what the difference is for you as far as investment wise go.
yeah, I mean, again, I think the biggest issue is right. Eventually, we want to get to cash flow. Cash flow is really hard, especially with 6-7% interest rates. So the best way to get to cash flow is to get the mortgage paid down to a point where you're either paid off or you can reduce that mortgage amount significantly and take out a smaller loan. Maybe you bought it for 300,000, but you get it paid down to 100,000 and refinance, and don't take anything out. Right now, you have $100,000, and instead of if you're renting it for 3,000 a month and your mortgage is only 1,400, you're making more money than
Right.
if your mortgage is 2,800.
And that's why it would make more sense to sell the smaller properties than to refi.
Yep, because then you can put more money down. You can go ahead and just keep really working it, and growing that thing. And again, as you're spread out, and I don't want to discourage people because this is the way that we have to start, right? No, I mean, obviously, I'm not going to say no one because there are people, but they're probably not listening to our show that have millions of dollars to start with and just go buy a 100-unit building off the start. But when you have someone that can create that by buying, $20,000 is a down payment for a $100,000 property. You can go to areas, especially if you're in Illinois, if you can't find stuff in cheaper areas on the south side of Chicago, you can go to places like Rockford or Kankakee or stuff like that and buy property for $120,000. Joliet, buy these smaller properties and eventually build over the next couple of years, build to where you have 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 20 of these, and then collectively sell them and go buy a huge, 50, 60, 70 unit building. And the economies of scale, you're finally going to be able to cash flow, unlike what you're going to be able to do. You become cash flow positive to a point where you can decide if you want to work anymore. There's not a whole lot of people that become cash flow positive enough on single family homes to be at a point where they're not working.
Yeah, I completely understand that, especially considering what you were talking about with the mowing of the lawns and the different
Mhm.
roofs and all the different things that can happen. It totally makes sense.
Yep. Now, the other thing I want to talk about, lesson number 2, and the first one we sort of talked about before on other podcasts, and I've made a lot of posts about it, and it's a strategy I really believe in. But some of the things that playing the game recently and sort of thinking about it more, that I thought about, that I see a lot of people could learn from, is one, the concept of buy where you are, buy what you can. Right? Far too many people, if you're rolling dice, you don't skip buying all the cheap properties because you just want to get the boardwalk. Like it would be a terrible strategy to wait until you have enough money until you land on boardwalk. When you see a good opportunity, you got to take it. You got to because that opportunity is going to give you enough equity by time you get the opportunity to buy where you want to buy, that you're going to have the ability to do it. If you don't get on the train, it's going to run away way too quick. You need to buy real estate as soon as you can. So that way the train keeps moving faster and faster, but you're already on it. So you're just moving with it. And I think that is a huge concept that far too many people disengage with. They want to get that perfect property. They want to get that thing. But guess what? You could easily go and wholesale a property, go and do a flip on a property, go and buy a smaller property in an area that you're not 100% in love with, and then just use that to gain equity until you find a spot, and then you can 1031 exchange. And that's something that I think that we didn't really talk about when we were talking about the exchange or about changing, selling 5 to 10 instead of refinancing, right? One of the cool things about that is you can do a 1031 exchange, sell those properties. You're not paying any capital gains tax on that as long as you're following the rules and buying another property with that money.
Can you kind of explain roughly what those rules are, like how the 1031 exchange works?
Yeah. So one is you have to hire. I'm saying that word so wrong. So if you know how to say it, say it for me. Um, a person that's actually going to do all the paperwork for you and record everything for the IRS and all that stuff. But the big ones are you can't go down in equity and you can't not use the money that you get from the sale. Meaning, you have a $200,000 home, you have $40,000 in equity, right? When you go and buy that new property, you have to have at least $40,000 in equity in it, and you have to use all $40,000 that you got after you paid off your mortgage and after you paid the closing costs. You can't go, oh, I'm going to take 20,000 and go spend it on a new bag or a new car, and then I'm going to take the 20,000 and go there. Then you're going to have to pay taxes on that 20,000, if not more. But if you take the whole 40,000 and what you buy, you have at least that $40,000 in equity, then you're going to be able to keep doing the 1031 exchanges, never have to pay capital gains tax. And here's the real great trick, right? When you die and you pass it on to your heirs, they get a step up in basis and they'll never have to pay tax.
Oh, nice. Even better.
So there's a lot of people, and a lot of people will go ahead and keep going with a 1031 exchange until they die. Exchange until you drop, I think is what they call it. But you can keep doing it all the way until you can't do it anymore, and your heirs get it once you die. And then instead of the IRS looking at it as them buying it for $100,000, if it's worth $300,000 when you die, IRS looks at it they bought it for $300,000 even though they didn't pay anything. So that's the best way to pass it to your heirs, because you're not going to have any capital gains tax or anything like that.
So in all reality, it's just about efficiency, making sure that you're
Yeah.
doing it the right way and paying attention to your numbers.
Yep. No, exactly. And I think again, going back to the point that we were on, your when opportunities arise, right? We want to make sure we're buying good opportunities. We don't want to buy something that's going to lose us money. And there's a lot of bad real estate deals out there. And really what it comes down to is you paid too much. I think every piece of real estate can be a great deal, but if you overpay for it, it quickly becomes not a great deal. So, finding those deals, and when they happen, especially now with interest rates going up and the price of homes going up so much, the deals are still out there, but they're not slapping you in the face like they were in 2020, 2019, or whenever the golden days were, right? They're not slapping you in the face like that anymore. So we really got to take a step back and say, hey, if I land on this and it's a good deal, I'm going to buy it. And then I'll worry about trading it later and getting there. Now going into location, a lot of people try to predict the future. A lot of people are trying to, I'm going to buy here because the neighborhood's getting better, etc. Find the deals that work now. And on top of that, then, if possible, when possible, we want our properties as close to each other as possible. Obviously, the mecca of that is, however many units you want to own all in one building, whether that's a 50 efficiency. But if you're not there yet and you are buying some houses and you can get 5 houses in one neighborhood, efficiency, you're going to have a lot better of a chance. You only have to talk to one property manager. You only have to talk to one lawn guy, however you're doing it that way. It's going to be much more efficient.
Now, we definitely, being in Chicagoland, we do have quite a few out of state, out of country investors.
Mm-hmm.
For people that are on that front, how do you suggest that they figure out which properties? It's still the same theory, right? Get properties in the same location, so you have to hire the same person, same people to manage it, same people to do the lawns, same people to do the maintenance, stuff like that. Is that the idea?
Yeah, I think so. And I think when you find that area that you have some deals in, you can get it, you can build your team around that. One of the clients that we have that come to us that are in the worst scenarios are the ones that bought a lot of investors have this attitude of, I don't want a buyer's agent realtor. I don't want someone representing me. I'm just going to go directly. I'm going to save a couple $1,000s by going directly to the seller's agent. And guess what? That seller's agent's job is to screw the shit out of you.
Right.
They represent the seller. They can care less what happens to you once you buy. They're going to tell you that the sun is going to be out 365 days. That, hey, don't worry about the rent roll only being $600 an apartment right now, because you can easily make that $2,000 an apartment, no problem. Don't even worry about it. They're going to show you everything possible to get you to buy that property, because that's their job. Their job is to get their seller as much money as possible, and you can't blame them. That's their job. That's what they're getting hired for. But if you have someone that's on your side looking for you and making sure everything is right, that you can trust and you can build that trust with, that's when you can start winning from out of state, because you may not see the property or you may not understand the area as much as someone that's local. And a lot of people run into problems because they buy a property that they were told is, 365 days of sunshine. And then they realize, oh, wait, there's no one here. There's no one actually living here. We've had people that's actually a better case. We've had people that bought the property and the rent roll is completely incorrect. No one was paying. Everyone had to be evicted. And that's a 10-month process of no money coming in. At that point, a lot of times you're at a loss where you're not going to be able to make that money back. And you're sort of, you don't have backup capital. You're not gonna ever get out of it. And you're selling for a loss.
Right. So really the whole point is that if you don't necessarily have the know-how, even if it's local for you, maybe you're just not as well versed in the numbers. And especially if you're from out of state or out of the country, you need to find someone to help you.
Yeah.
Is what we're getting at.
Yeah. And I think, look, I'm not like, I would never hire myself to change out my toilet. Like I'm not a plumber. I'm not skilled there, et cetera. I'm going to hire our plumbers to go and do stuff like that for me. I think far too often people fail because they want to be the ones that did it themselves. They want to pull themselves up on the bootstraps and say, I did it. I'm going to tell you right now, it's a lot easier and a lot better to say, hey, look, I paid a lot of money to some people to do some stuff for me, but now everything's running perfectly and everything's operating great and we're in a good spot.
Exactly. Like you were saying, cash flow. That's what it's all about.
Yeah, it's all about cash flow. And I think the other mistake that people make is they think that it's going to be instant cash flow. Um, it really isn't. Like you're gonna cash. You should always cash flow a little bit, but realistically, if you're actually measuring that correctly and you're actually putting money aside to pay for major repairs like roofs and furnace replacements and stuff like that, you're probably not actually cash flowing the first 5-10 years.
Right.
But here's the cool thing. I shouldn't say 5 to 10 years. I said 3 to 5 years. Is probably what I meant to say there. But you're probably not cash flowing for the first 3 to 5 years. But here's the thing. Once you get past those 5 years, your mortgage is still going to be the same dollar amount. Your rent has increased 10% every year or 5% every year, whatever, depending on the market, right? So now you're going to actually start cash flowing. I think what happens is people think that they're supposed to be cash flowing in year one and year two. And yes, you might make $100 or a couple $100, but realistically, you're not making that much until you let time do its thing and raise the rent prices over a 3, 5, 10-year period. Until you let time do its thing and pay down your mortgage so that you're not paying as much every year, or once you pay it off, like, look at a simple example, a house for 200,000, you might be paying, let's say, a mortgage of 1,500 a month, right? If you're renting it out for 2,000, you're making 500 a month. Once you pay that off, you're now making that 1,500 to 2,000 a month. Obviously minus your taxes and stuff like that, but you're still going to be making a lot more of that as profit versus when you have a mortgage. So I think the goal is to get there as quick as possible to a place where you're cash flowing over your mortgage or to a place where all your mortgages are paid off. And again, that's where you have 5 houses and they all have 100,000 in equity. Selling those and taking that 500,000 and putting it to a bigger property, you're going to be able to pay that property off a lot quicker,
right?
Because you're using that.
So, what are some of the suggestions or ideas that you have as far as keeping positive cash flow? What are some things that landlords can do to make sure that they do their best to make it positive?
So, I think one that a lot of people don't consider is, again, understanding that you're not going to make that much cash flow the first few years and really building up that reserve. Far too often does someone hold on to a property for 3 or 4 years. the roof goes bad, or they should have known the roof was bad, right? They should have had that report, but they didn't put any money aside. And now all of a sudden, they have a $20,000 bill to replace a roof, and yeah, that's their whole income for the year. If they were putting money aside over the last 4 or 5 years, they could have that in an account, and it doesn't even there's no sweat there.
Is there a number that you recommend people try and hit for reserves?
So what I like to do is take a look at the property, right? And I highly recommend that you get an inspection. Far too many investors think that they know too much and they're not going to get an inspection, or they're going to have their contractor walk it, et cetera. Get an inspection. It's going to cost you 400, $500, whatever it is, and it's worth its weight in gold. But that's going to outline you. They're going to say, hey, this roof has 10 years left. This furnace has 3 years left. And you can take that amount of time. So if you know your roof is a $10,000 roof to replace, you have 5 years left, then you got to save 2 grand a year. If you have 20 years left, then you got to save, 500 a year. So you can build that through all your CapEx things and just use that and go from there.
Beautiful. That makes a lot of sense. Um, Over leveraging. Can you get into that a little bit?
Yeah. So again, I think it became very popular in 2018, 2017. Obviously, it was very popular in 2007 before the crash. But the whole BRRRR strategy, and yes, there is a point to it where it works. That's when you're building those houses, right? You're getting that off the ground. But I think far too many people take that strategy way too far, and they say, "Oh, I'm going to keep borrowing. I'm going to invest. I'm going to keep refinancing every 3 years and take money out, take money out, take money out." And then all of a sudden, you're asking yourself, "Why am I not cash flowing?" Well, because you keep refinancing, you keep starting the way mortgages work, right? A lot of people don't realize this. The first 5 years, all you're paying is interest. You're barely paying any principal. And then you start to knock down that principal. So if you're refinancing every 5 years, you're never paying any principal down. Ever. So you're not, yeah, you're never going to get to a point where you're better off or cash flowing better. So really working to, again, if you're in that buy mode, if you're in that I'm trying to build as fast as possible, leverage is a great way to work it out. But you need to have a strategy of when you're going to stop the leverage and when you're going to start paying it back so that you can get to a point. If you're 20 or 30, leverage for 5 years, 6 years, get as many houses as you can. But then when you're 38, 40, 50, the next 10 years should be paying them off so that when you go into retirement, you don't have a mortgage to worry about. And it can cash flow and pay for the things in the life that you're trying to get when you go into retirement.
Makes sense. All right. Now, diversification. In monopoly, when you have both utilities and railroads, it gives you more income, right?
Mm-hmm.
So no matter where people land. In real estate, what would you say that kind of equates to?
Man, there's so many ways to make money in real estate. So one, I think if you're just starting off and you're 9 to 5 and you're not making a whole lot, you're making under 100 grand a year and you don't have anything saved up yet, buying into REITs, and which is basically the real estate equivalent to a stock, right? You're buying small parts of big projects and just learning how to learn from there, reading what each one does, reading how they're profiting, et cetera, and learning why you buy it. You can start investing and saving money, making 10% a year until you have enough for that down payment and to have your reserve ready to go. So I think that's a big thing. Another way, once you're in real estate, right? Doing a flip, doing a wholesale, things like that are going to make you money so that you have more money to do a down payment and buy a better property. So all these things are variable options of ways to earn money in real estate. Other ways is getting to a field. If you don't have a 9 to 5 yet, if you're younger and you're not sure what you want to do with life, you can get into a 9 to 5 like we did, where we became real estate agents, where we became property managers for other owners, where we became, appraisers or contractors, things like that. And you can really learn the game through your 9 to 5 if you create it that way, where you're doing stuff around real estate. You're still making that money, and then you can use that money to eventually invest into passive income with real estate.
Perfect. Now we were talking about cash reserves, keeping money on the side for when you need it, and we kind of went into the numbers for that. But what are, just to give a quick list of things that I really need to think about when it comes to my reserves? I know you mentioned the roof.
So it's your major capex. So your roof, your furnace, your water heater, right? Those things we know are going to go bad. You may probably want something for a random emergency, like your pipes go bust or something like that, that you have something held back that you can fix those. And then the other one is vacancy. Look, if you can't deal with 10 months to evict a tenant, especially if you're investing on the south side of Chicago where it's C and D class areas, you're going to, over a 5 to 10 year period, you're going to make way more money than you would in an A class for the amount of money you put in. But there's going to be a year where you make no money. And if you don't have money to pay your mortgages while you're doing an eviction for 10 months, while you're rehabbing and repairing the property and putting a new tenant in, you're going to lose. You're going to end up
Right.
having to sell. You're going to be underwater, not be able to catch up. So you really want to have that, I'd say 3 to 6 months of mortgages and insurance and all that stuff put away so that if you do run into that storm of having to do an eviction, that you're not worried about it. You're not stressing over it and you're able to quickly get the property repaired, get a new tenant in and start cash flowing.
Perfect. That makes sense. Now, couple quick myths to bust here, Tim. I'm gonna rattle off a myth for you. I
All
want
right.
you to tell me what the reality is.
Yep.
Always go for the most expensive property.
Yeah. I mean, most of the time, and there are times where the most expensive property is fine if you're looking for something that is less risky and you say, hey, I got enough money, I just need a little bit extra here and there. And it's the equivalent. We're looking at another financial service, right? It's like buying a CD. You know you're gonna get 3 or 4%. You know you can't lose money. It's safe. You're gonna make a little bit of money. It's better than just keeping money in the bank. But at the same time, there are stocks and other financial investments that are going to give you 10, 12% generally, but there's going to be some downside to that. Same way, you can buy property for cheaper that you're going to cash flow much heavier on, or you can buy really expensive property where you're hoping that you get appreciation enough to make enough money for you, but you're not really going to cash flow because you have so much money in it and rent at some point caps itself.
Got it. All right. Myth number two: hold forever.
Yes and no. I think that there is a part of that, right? Like the I think forever is a long time. I think there's always going to be a point where selling it's probably worth it, but I think also too many people sell way too soon. Um, you're not really going to start seeing the true value until year 5, year 10 of owning a property. Now, again, you want to be in the right property. You want to sell quickly on the small properties when you have enough equity to buy bigger property with it. But once you get to that 30, 40, 50 unit property that's going to pay for your retirement, you can hold on to that for a long time. You can pass that on to your kids. And there may be a time where someone offers you, 20, 30 million for it. And you say, okay, that's enough. I can throw it in the stock market and not have to worry about any of this again and still have generational wealth and it's worth selling. But I would still say, work towards paying it down and getting that forever property in shape, making sure it's well kept, making sure everything is working properly and that you don't have a lot of maintenance issues with it and stabilize fully and then hold on to it as long as you can.
All right. And the final myth here, and then we'll wrap up this segment, is it's all luck.
So I think that I have a very different definition than most people for luck, right? My definition of luck has always been opportunity meets preparedness, right? So in that case,
I like
yes,
that.
it is all luck. It is all you being prepared to buy when the opportunity shows up. A lot of people look at real estate and look at rich people in general, wealthy people in general, and say, oh, they got lucky. They got lucky. No, they were prepared. Their family prepared them. They were prepared to do better. And that's what really put them in that situation where when the opportunity came, they were able to take advantage of it. So I do think it's luck in my definition of luck. I don't think it's luck for what most people consider luck, where it just happened and you were born in the right family. You were born, I think anyone can work towards it and get
So really, it's about strategy, about timing and staying in the game long enough to make sure that you're winning.
Yep, exactly. And,
Okay.
and I think being able to take help and being able to take feedback and the really cool thing about real estate is, going back to where we were and the MBOA and stuff like that, there's a lot of cool organizations, a lot of cool networking opportunities where you can meet people that may be way wealthier than you, maybe just starting off, but everyone's going to have ideas. Everyone's going to be throwing things at each other, and you can really come to a place together where you can easily get answers that you're looking for.
All right, cool. Thank you for that, Tim. That was some awesome info. Definitely learned a lot there.
Awesome,
I
awesome.
never really. When's the last time you played Monopoly?
It's a good question. It's been a while, but I have this idea, and I'm going to throw this out for everyone. I have this idea. I want and right now I want to thank. We're in the Bolingbrook Library recording this right now. They have a really cool studio that we're using to use their equipment and record it. And we're trying this out, and this might be our new home for recording. Um, I really think it'd be cool to get 4 or 5 people, real estate people, whether it's realtors or we could do this multiple times, but just play a game and record it and just do everyone. So I'm gonna throw this out there. If you want to get in and play with us, and we'll record it and make some content out of it and real cool stuff. If you're anything in the real estate industry, contractors, realtors, whatever, let's get a group of us together and make some content and play it. 'Cause I haven't played it in a while, but um, I think, yeah, I remember the many times of getting frustrated and quitting the game way too early. I think that's
Throwing
something
the board.
throwing the board, and I think that's what especially newer investors do is they get in the game, and then 3 years in they quit because it's not working for them. But you got to keep going. So I do want to get a game set up at some point here and play it again soon, because it's been a while.
All right, cool. I think that'd be fun. I'm definitely for that. All right, we are moving on to our next segment, which is new, and it is titled "Welcome to Is My Landlord an Asshole?" The part of the show we're going to dissect real tenant landlord stories and help you decide, is it just bad luck, or is your landlord actually being a jerk? All right, so um, we have an example from Chicago this week. I'm going to read it off here, Tim, and then you can kind of dig into it a little bit. It's a story out of Logan Square. All right. The kind of move that makes Chicago tenants furious. In late 2024, longtime residents of a building on Sawyer and Belden were told their landlord was renovating the building and would not renew their leases. But then the company offered lease extensions for a 25% rent hike, essentially doubling the rent from $1,200 to around $2,400. Not only that, but they illegally, cut off garbage service and failed to provide the 120 days termination notice required by Chicago law. Tenants pushed back by forming the Belden Sawyer Tenant Association, protesting outside the landlord's office and organizing rent strikes. So, Tim, I ask you this: is this landlord an asshole?
Yeah, because they didn't do it the right way. I think that one is, if you're in a spot, unfortunately, a lot of people, and I'm going to assume maybe they bought the building or something like that. A lot of landlords, especially older landlords that have their property paid off, they don't raise the rents properly. They're not keeping up with taxes, things like that. And man, just the last 2 years and with the tariffs this year and everything like that, prices of everything has gone up. So I think you're going to see landlords bring things up to market, but you got to follow the rules. You got to give the proper notice per the law. You got to give um, them the opportunity. And I don't really get what a tenant union does, but if they want to form one, sure, let them. It's they're allowed to.
Right.
I have no idea what the point of it is, but you can't stop them from doing it. So you gotta let them do it.
Right. Now, from the investor or the landlord standpoint, some of these tenants are actually being coached, right? Like they're being coached from attorneys to pay attention to this stuff so that they can potentially file lawsuits.
Absolutely. I mean, everyone's heard of ambulance chasers and attorneys that go around car accidents and try to make money that way and find people that they can sue for. In Chicago, landlords are a super target for tenant rights attorneys. So I mean, they're going after there's posts online on Facebook that we see every day where they're like, "Hey, is your landlord doing this? Let us make you 10 grand. Let us make you 5 grand." Like they are looking for the landlords that are not following the law. And some of the laws are silly, and some of the laws are so annoying and so meticulous that most landlords don't follow it. And these attorneys are finding it and going after you for the rent that you collected. There was another lawsuit that I just heard about where the tenant got literally all of the rent back from the 3 years they stayed there. They were in an illegal apartment. It got caught. They sued, said, "Hey, you rented us an apartment that was illegal." and they won 3 years of back rent or 3 years of rent that they paid plus attorney fees plus all that. So it happens for sure.
So really, the key for a landlord is just to keep documentation of everything.
Yep.
Just make sure that you know everything that's going on. Make sure you know your fair housing notices and what you need to do, and to be organized, right?
Yeah, and I think another one, especially with the retaliation laws now in Illinois, you need to make sure that you're treating everyone the same, right? You should have the same process for determining rent increases for everyone. If you own 20 properties across the city and you're only raising rent in one property, and the tenant goes and says, well, I filed a complaint and that's probably why he's doing it, you're going to be in trouble. But if you can show documentation that this is how we calculate the fair rental increase amount, and we do it across the board for all of our properties, and this is what happened, this is how it happened, it would have happened whether they did X, Y, or Z, um, then you can prove that in court and you can stay out of a lot of trouble.
Awesome. That makes a lot of sense. So ultimately, if you're a landlord, just pay attention to what you're doing. Make sure that you know what you're doing and keep track of what you're doing. And if you are a tenant who happens to be listening to the podcast because you want to start investing sometime, and you have a story you want to see featured here, let us know. We're happy to get some opinions on it. All right, Tim. For this next segment, we're going to do the landlord tip of the day. Can you please enlighten us?
Yeah, so let's go ahead and talk about tenant payment options. All right, so a couple things that I want to talk about here. One is it is very, very important to have multiple options for your tenant, just because it's 2025. You don't have a way for them to pay online. You don't have a way to make it easy. You're going to make it harder on yourself to collect the rent. With that being said, even though it's 2025, there are still going to be tenants that don't have a computer, that don't have access to bank accounts, etc. So we also want to have options for them to send in checks or to pay by cash. And that is now a legal requirement for in Illinois that you have to allow a tenant to pay with a check and not charge any extra fee for them doing that. So that is something that you need to be aware of. You need to have a non-online option for them where they can pay cash or pay in check. And for newer tenants, you want to give them the convenience of paying online. So having multiple options is a great way. Now, here's one caveat to that I'll give to everyone, and that is things like Zelle, we want to stay away from. Reason being, you cannot stop a tenant from paying you via Zelle. You're in the middle of an eviction, you're 6 months in, you're about to get the eviction granted to you, and they make a $10 payment to you. They can get the entire eviction canceled and you have to start all over. You accepted payment, even though you had no option to not accept it. So I would stay away from programs like Zelle. Use a good rent management software, your accounting software, et cetera. Let them pay there, but something where you can stop payments from coming in.
Awesome. That makes perfect sense. Now, this kind of ties into what we were just talking about with the policies and things to watch out for. But this is another thing that a tenant could potentially sue you for if you're doing it wrong, correct?
Yeah, I mean, if you're not allowing them to pay, by check or by cash, at that point, starting with the new law that just started this year, you have to allow them to pay with check or cash. Or, like I said, if you're not, they can come after you when you put the lawsuit in. If they have documentation that you're not accepting the payment, you're going to have some issues.
Awesome. Well, Tim, thank you very much. Everything today went very well. I think that we got some really good information for our landlords. Is there anything you'd like to throw in before we wrap things up here?
No, I think I'm good. I want everyone, if you haven't yet, give us a review depending on where you're listening. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, please give us a review and rate our show. If you are listening on YouTube, leave us a comment. Give us questions. We'd love to answer some questions from you
Please.
guys. So give us questions down in the comments and we'll answer them on a future show. See you guys. Have a great time.
Have a good one, everyone.